It's the Midwest Sheep and Goat Market Report, brought to you by Moline Seed and Fence. They're proud to sponsor the Midwest Sheep and Goat Market Report. Moline Seed and Fence is your local dealer for Riviera custom gates, goat and sheep pens, along with Mountain View sheep and goat equipment. Check out all their products when you visit MolineSeedandFence.com. That's MolineSeedandFence.com. Coming out here for the first weekend in June, the report going to look a little bit different this week as I had to jump out early and I wasn't able to compile the data as we usually do on a weekly basis, but I thought, well, let's go to the country and let's talk to our producers in the country, and one of those being Jake Miller out of Southwest Nebraska. Jake recently has incorporated hair lambs or hair sheep into his operation, both with large ruminants as well. He's got a pretty well known on the fencing side, so I thought it'd be a good kind of overview of his operation and what he has learned in his years in the business. So Jake, thanks so much for joining us. I think as we get started here, just give us a rundown. Where does your operation stand today in terms of the cooperation of mixed ruminants on the place?
Yeah, Clay, our operation, we're in Southwest Nebraska, just west of McCook at Culbertson. Got pretty diverse mix of native rangeland, got some CRP that is back to grass and we're grazing. That is now expired. And then also we grow some grazing crops on our cropland, and our goal is to graze 365 days a year. We've been doing that with the cattle for probably close to 20 years now. We're getting close to that, a good 15 years for sure anyways. And that's kind of what sparked the interest in the sheep, was just looking around and seeing that we have some plants and some smaller spaces that we could probably utilize some sheep with, and doing some studying too about multi-species grazing, using the cattle to take the parasite load off sheep and sheep to take the parasite load off cattle as each other are dead-end host for parasites. We're not exactly to that point yet, but we've got the sheep out grazing now, getting through that. So our main goal is just whichever species we're using, just working to get to grazing 365 days with the sheep, and as well as keeping the cattle doing that and reducing feed costs that way, and trying to improve the soil and the pastures along the way with the animals.
It's a holistic management approach, and really it's trying to address all issues in one. But you brought up a great point here. You've got an end goal. You're wanting to be able to incorporate both the cattle and the sheep together, helping them help each other. But it's not something you build overnight. Tentatively, what would you say somebody needs to come in with the mindset of if they're wanting to set up a situation similar to yours, multi-species grazing over multiple tracks and stuff? What is a realistic time frame here?
3 to 5 years is going to be pretty realistic time frame, especially if you're like me. You know, I grew up with cattle my whole life and never had sheep until we bought some. So even though they are similar to cattle in the way they graze and the way you handle them and everything, there is different infrastructure, different handling techniques, different nutritional needs. So, you know, we're starting out with about 35 to 40 ewes and just really trying to sit back and learn from them, as well as mold them into, you know, the type of sheep that we want to fit our operation and try to fit those goals.
Well, you're kind of bringing different things together, and again, giving yourself plenty of time. This is not an overnight situation that happens, and how it all just comes together as well. Now that you've had the sheep here for a little while, and hair sheep, I should point out that, but now that you've had them on the place for a little while, you're getting down to some of your first grazing rotations with them. What has been some of the biggest learning curves you've seen there with the hair sheep?
There's been a lot of learning curves here, and of course, we bought them during the drought here, so we grazed for a while, and then we ended up dry lighting them and feeding them. So one of the things we had to learn there is that compared to a cow, a sheep has a hard time eating enough forage in a day, or hay, whatever, to get the protein needs that they have if they're on a drier, lower quality feed. When they are gestating or lactating, they need close to the same actual pound of protein as a cow does during the day. So we did have to supplement some protein, do a few things with that. We saw some stuff with conception along the way, learned that lesson. Some of the other things that we've learned too, guard dogs have been a challenge. We tried sheep a few years ago. We weren't set up with infrastructure. We had about 25 ewes and we weaned 7 lambs that year. Coyotes just absolutely destroyed us on the lamb side, and then also they killed some ewes as well. So then bringing in different livestock guard animals. We inherited a couple llamas from a guy we got some sheep from. They're with the lambs now, getting along all right with them. We've not had to put them to the test, thankfully. And we just picked up a pair of Anatolian guard dogs as well. And, then you learn how much sheep like to eat dog food. Start going through those trials and working on building, a feeding station for the guard dogs, getting them taught to stay inside of the electric fence as well, because I can tell you from experience, when they get shot by electric fence, you might not see them for 3 days. They go hide for a while. Some other things, too, that have been challenges is obviously infrastructure. We're set up for cattle, so, our panels and stuff, there's gaps that sheep can crawl through, and we can talk more about fencing in a little bit also. But, then on the other side of the challenge is genetics have been a challenge for us also. There's a lot of great sheep in the U.S., but what we've found for us personally is we're trying to go with the Dorper breed, and we would really like to get back to the South African genetics. A lot of Mickey Phillips and Sons Dorpers. They were kind of some of the pioneers of the breed. And going back to their breed standards, looking at those genetics, right now we can't get genetics in from South Africa directly, but Australia has approved to send genetics into the U.S. We brought some embryos in a year ago, put those in. We've got those lambs on the ground now. And then working with some other breeders that have closely worked with those genetics too, to bring that in to try to get the genetics that we're looking for. And then hopefully by the time we have all the livestock guard dogs and genetics and sheep, the sheep we want and the fencing and all that figured out, hopefully here, in the next 3 years or so, we'll be kind of at a scale and a point where we're ready to go with this and push a little bit harder and have the kinks worked out.
Well, and you bring it up right there. One of the biggest kinks, oftentimes, folks get into the small ruminants, whether it be sheep, goats, the hair sheep. They immediately find out it's not as simple as maybe fencing cattle or horses, something like that. And, of course, you also have your live wire fence supply. So you have access and to try and experiment with a lot of different things. Where are you on sheep fencing right now? And what would you say is kind of some of the trials and errors that you feel have been the most important for you when it comes to fencing?
Some of those trial and errors. I guess one of the first mistakes we've made, we used electric netting, which a lot of people swear by. Works great for some situations. Personally, it was too much labor for me, and then we also had a lamb get a head hung in it and lost a lamb that way, and I was kind of over it at that point. And when we first attempted this using the netting, I was fencing for the sheep. I kind of took a step back and looked at it, and I said, this is not going to work if we have to go above $15,000 a mile fence everywhere on the place. So we took a step back and we decided, all right, we're going to fit the sheep to the fence we have. So right now we're using a 3-wire polywire with step-in posts, very portable, flexible fencing that we can throw up anywhere pretty quick. So we're starting with 3 wires on those. We just had lambs that we turned out last week, had never seen electric fence before. See, they've been in there 4 days. We've not had any issues. We had set an alfalfa bale right in the fence line that they had been eating, and we got everybody to figure the system out that way. And then going forward, we're going to keep reducing the wires. My goal is to have them down to 1 wire, and then that will allow us to have 1 offset hot wire around our barbed wire perimeter fences that we have for the cattle already and get them pushed in there. The other thing that we've learned, too, is as far as a fence charger goes, we pretty much do a minimum of 8 joules on everything, no matter the size of the fence. That really just gives it that extra pop that it needs to teach those animals the first time. With cattle, you can get away with a pretty small charger as long as there's a little bit of current in the fence. They usually don't bother it. The sheep and goats do tend to push on that a little bit more. And then along with that, too, we've had to, redo some ground systems and stuff for those larger chargers compared to what we had in place before. And the other reason, too, for a larger charger is, of course, with cattle, usually we're running a single wire that's up at waist high. And now with the sheep fence, we've got that wire down somewhere in the 8-inch tall range or so. And with the moisture we're blessed with here lately, now we've got stuff that forage that has grown up past that point. So we do have some wires shorted out and stuff and some of those weeds, and that larger charger allows us to burn that down a lot faster. Give us the performance that we're wanting to keep the sheep in.
So there's a lot of different ways you can go, and it is possible. It just takes some critical thinking, talking with folks in the know. But yeah, as you said, make the sheep form to the fences you have versus trying to start from scratch, start from that square one situation. Given the fact that you went down you're heading down the Dorper sheep, you're wanting to improve your genetics, you've got a long-ranging vision. This isn't a fly-by-night operation. You're looking at being in this for the long haul in terms of it. So what do you see as the future here on the hair sheep and the hair lamb side for growth in the industry, and where, I guess, should we be looking, or in your thoughts, where should we be looking for that growth from what you're seeing and the reason you want to be in the industry?
I think there's a lot of growth coming. There's starting to be a shift. The more solar farms and things like that go in, sheep are a valuable tool to graze those solar farms. The panels aren't high enough off the ground for cattle to clear underneath of them. Goats can be viable in some places, but I know I've heard reports of goats getting on some panels. So the hair sheep kind of fit that little niche in particular. So I think that's going to be a big growth point. On a little bit different tune, too, for my family and I, my wife likes the sheep. Our daughters like the sheep. Our daughters will be able to start showing animals here in 4 or 5 years. I think it's something, too. The kids have a lot of confidence around the sheep already. Even the 11-month-old will go out there now, and she's clapping and trying to say sheep and having a good time with them. So from that standpoint, I think there's a good family growth opportunity for us just, locally here. But in the grand scheme of things, the other thing that sheep have done, the small ruminants, it's been proven, several times that you can produce more dollars profit per animal unit out on the pasture with small ruminants. That works best in tandem with a large ruminant, like running the cows, because that still helps keep some of the overhead costs and stuff down just with the dollars generated by the cows as well. We're starting to see a little bit more of a push in restaurants and stuff. You're starting to see some more lamb on the menu. I work with a doctor in Grand Island, and I've been talking to her. Grass-fed lamb meat has it's the second best of salmon as far as the omega-3 to omega-6 ratios in there. So there is a little bit of a health food movement coming on with it too, because personally I'm not a big fish eater at all. And when they're saying that it's heart healthy and that stuff, that could be another option for people as well. But I think the biggest lack in the industry right now is just consumer education, and marketing opportunities is probably the biggest two holdbacks for the industry as a whole at the moment. But I think we'll start to see some of those open up here pretty quick.
There's definitely a lot to consider, but it's an industry that's on the growth, and there's opportunity. And like you said, it's one the family can be involved in. It's one maybe a little less capital intensive on those first ones. So great to see it. Glad your family's able to be a part of it. Jake, I apologize. I'm running out a little bit of time on my end. Would love to dive into this deeper, but tell us a little bit more about your fence company as well. Maybe final closing thoughts here before we wrap things up.
So the fence company, it kind of happened by accident. I came home from college and was just trying to find fence chargers that worked for our operation. Didn't really find the sort of chargers I was looking for, so we started building our own, and then some neighbors saw it, and it kind of snowballed from there. The farther we get into this grazing deal, it was hard to find the quality products locally that I wanted. So now we've kind of went through several different brands of fence stuff, put them to the test on our operation. We know what products we like from each brand, and we're able to pass that on to our customers, help them save money up front by getting them the quality products the first time.
Again, we're talking with Jake Miller as he's joining us here today, and joining us on the Midwest Sheep and Goat Market Report. Of course, you can always catch up the latest when you catch up on the Spotify, or you catch up at ruralradionetwork.com. Jake, thanks so much for the time. This has been the Midwest Sheep and Goat Market Report.